when we are talking about people and the hours that they can supply to your organization, or that they can be sold externally, it doesn't really make any difference. They are actually very similar to an inventory of donuts, and here's what I mean. At the start of the day, you order 120 donuts. You only sell 60 donuts. You will be losing money unless you've overpriced the donuts. If at the start of the day you order 120 donuts and you sell all of your 120 donuts, you probably left some money on the table, because there were probably people who showed up and wished that they could buy a donut and couldn't. Hours in professional services or in any kind of services organization are exactly the same way. People show up at the start of the day, they have 8 hours to give to an effort or to a client or to charge for. At the end of the day, if they've used less than 8 hours, then that time has been wasted. There's no way to recover it. It's a stale donut. On the other hand, if at the end of the day they've spent 10 hours, you are probably understaffed, and sooner or later you will be disappointing your clients. Again, this is very, very straightforward, and I call this out because a lot of times, and I'm going to be guilty of this, hours are an inventory. They are an inventory that should be cleared at the end of every day. Ideally, perfectly, you will have exactly the number of hours you need and no more than the number of hours you need. However, that will not be possible. You will always have an overage or an underage. And in the end, this is all important because when it comes to justifying the purchase of a system to more efficiently use hours, in other words, to control the inventory of hours that you are using, the first place to look for justifying it is saying, wow, if we actually sold one more donut a day, this is what the price would amount. This is how much more money we would earn. And look, we have the donut in the counter. Why isn't it going out the door? It is the exact same thing with hours. I have a person who has 8 hours available. They only use 4. If that needle can be moved to 4.5, most of the times the cost justification for purchasing a system will immediately pay for itself. We can talk about this, and we can talk about the subtleties of this if anybody has any questions or wants to circle back to it. But in the end, and I'll keep reiterating this, despite all the complexity we'll introduce, this really is a very simple process. There's an inventory of hours, and they need to go out the door every single day. One of the things that makes this process more complicated, and of course we recognize that people aren't necessarily selling donuts, is that we have a lot of systems scattered across the organization. Not only a lot of systems, but a lot of organizations. And each one of these systems and their organizations and these different organizations sees their world the way they see their world through their unique perspective. In most organizations, these all come back together and they get the job done, but how efficiently they do so is really the subject of this webinar. And as you can see, and I'm sure you'll see it reflected in your own organization, this matters not only to consultants selling time to external clients, it matters anywhere you have an organization that must supply services to another organization. So one of the things that OnePlan does, and we'll talk about this repeatedly, is act as a bridge between all of these systems and put things into a certain view and a certain perspective that will enable you and your organization to maximize your utilization of those resources, whether it be for chargeability or simply internal chargebacks. Performance and process maturity are tightly linked. These should be no surprise to anybody. Maybe in terms of the details they can be. The key to understanding this is understanding why we're presenting this slide is two things. One, that process always plays a role. No purchase of a tool is going to be a magical solution. You are going to need to make the most of it. And OnePlan, by the way, provides consulting services if that's a requirement. But two, and maybe more importantly, these kinds of metrics are used to justify the purchase and the investment in these systems. So if in your unique case, you have a question about projects being delivered on time. Let's suppose that you are contracted to make certain deliverables happen. Let's suppose that you are, for example, a clinical research trial organization supplying clinical research trials, and you must meet milestones on time in order to charge for the overall progress of the project. Quantifying that penalty or that ability is key to paying for the system. And instead of talking to people about how great it would be if you had a better product and how better your lives would be, it's always better to root this in numbers and finance. So again, in terms of this particular slide, that's why we're presenting it. Second reason why, but also I hope that if it comes to it and you're actually interested in this, you can circle back with us and say, hey, we'd like some help quantifying our business case for this. OnePlan for services delivery. So the key to understanding how OnePlan plays in this space is the ability OnePlan has to integrate a complex schedule. So you must deliver something, whether it's a bridge, whether it's an implementation of an ERP system, whether it's, again, a clinical research trial. You have a schedule that needs to be maintained and integrated and is you're contractually obligated to do, along with its risks and obligations, with resource capacity planning, resource utilization maximization, and client success. This OnePlan puts you, the client, in a position where you can both maximize your resource utilization because you either need to charge back for it or you need to bill for it on a time and materials basis, alongside your ability to deliver against your larger project, which you may be billing for in a completely different way. OnePlan does this by providing AI-enhanced operational excellence, project financials. How is this particular project doing on a time and materials and basis? Seamless integration with systems that you probably already have in place. With scalability and adaptability, we understand that situations change. You may have sold new contracts, you may have acquired new commitments, you will need to make substitutions. And again, ultimately, as we said, this quality of your service and your performance against whatever your contract was. And we're using the word contract, but it could be anything. Again, it could be an internal commitment, or it could be a formal external commitment. All right. So a traditional PSA, unlike OnePlan, operates from project sales, project planning, resource utilization, team collaboration, time and expense, project accounting intelligence. That's great. OnePlan supports all of these things, but OnePlan takes a different approach. We are actually, and we'll talk about this and demonstrate this, we are actually in the business of improving visibility of planning within the sales process itself, with making the handoff of project estimation from sales to delivery. Making the handoff of the project from sales to delivery seamless, because it will have ultimately been built by delivery to begin with. Maybe very interestingly, maybe not, supporting multiple methodologies for project delivery. If you're in an environment where there are multiple methodologies, and most companies are, it's important to know that OnePlan supports multiple methods. Integrating the use of multiple tools and solutions. Again, this will be a familiar theme. Scenario modeling to manage a dynamic environment. This may be, to some, another key. We are typically in an environment where we have more demand on our resources than we're able to supply. Scenario modeling puts us in a position where, instead of simply arguing that our people are overworked, we're actually able to quantify and demonstrate that we should be hiring, for example. And in particular, it allows us, in many cases, to look ahead and see, if we sign a particular contract, what the likely impact is on our services organization. AI tools to ensure data is complete and accurate, and predictive analytics and decision support. This last item sometimes gets lost in boilerplate language, but honestly, all of these planning systems, including OnePlan, are in the business not only of predicting the future, but of making the future happen. And I think people lose sight of this, buried under some business terminology, but it really is that straightforward. When you make a plan, you are saying what you think the future would be like, and when you tend to work that plan, you are attempting to make the future be what you want it to be. And that's what OnePlan supports. So integrated services delivery, OnePlan is actually oftentimes, and our expectation is that it sits in between CRM and a financial system. And you might ask, why is this sitting in between? And what we find, again, is that our clients actually have this immense need for optimizing services and hours spent one way or the other. And that in between these two systems, which are not going anywhere in most organizations, there is a need for this system, in this case OnePlan, that brings everything all together without forcing people to make a huge number of changes and without there being this immense adoption curve. I'm going to talk a little bit, and this is where we really start to complicate the donut story. Organizations often mistake one system of record with one valid way of doing things. OnePlan, the product, does not force this. OnePlan recognizes that in any given organization, you really may have 3 different ways of attempting to plan and shape the future. Scheduling, both Agile and Waterfall. We'll show both of these things in the demo and in some slides as well, but it's important to understand that this is one way that people attempt to plan. The second way is resource capacity planning. The big difference between the schedule, which is project and outcome specific, and resource capacity planning is that resource capacity planning is resource centric. So you are most concerned with saturating and utilizing your resources. Project dates and or deliverables may be the secondary concern. And finally, there's financial. Again, OnePlan supports this as well. This approach starts with money that can be spent, money that must be spent, revenue that must be generated. It may or may not overlap with resource capacity planning and scheduling. All 3, the important thing is, all 3 are valid and all 3 are supported as first-class citizens within OnePlan. It is a process question as to which one becomes the primary in your organization. In most organizations who are pure consulting organizations, for example, resource capacity planning is everything. Think about law firms and accounting firms. In organizations that are actually in the business of selling contracts with a large delivery and a time and materials piece, scheduling and resource capacity planning must work together. And in other organizations, still the planning just then starts with financials. Either way, my point and what I really want to make sure the takeaway from this slide is that OnePlan supports all of these as first-class citizens. So what does this mean? To start with, creating a proposed schedule, and we will show how this can be kind of layered into your current work in the demo. OnePlan allows you to lay down a schedule in a classic sense, and then use that to go back as a proposal as part of your sales proposal, your fully integrated sales proposal. I think this is pretty obvious. A lot of companies do this ad hoc. What OnePlan would bring to the table is a way to make this method or make this process consistent and reusable. So you are actually able to harvest best practices going forward as you make additional proposals. Create resource estimates. So again, to the point of there being first class and second class planning, but there not being a difference in raw validity, instead of starting with a proposal based on a project schedule, your organization may start with a proposal based on your resources that you have available and what you need to use. Again, this may sound strange, but in a lot of organizations, blocks of hours are sold. I need to sell people for 3 months. I need to sell people for 6 months, whatever else it is. And the project schedule comes after the fact, once the people are assigned. Again, both are valid and both supported in OnePlan. You're able to then, of course, model future resource needs against plans. And this is where we start to be able to see the two in conjunction. We'll come back and talk about that a little bit further. Analyze and forecast the cost models. So in an organization that cares about revenue being generated by billable resources, and again, that revenue may be from chargebacks or it could be from a time and materials invoice. It really doesn't matter as far as OnePlan is concerned. What you want to be able to model is both the cost of supplying these resources and the potential revenue targets. This may enable you to prioritize various contracts. You may be in a situation where you can't prioritize anything and you simply have to do every contract sold. Either way, you're able to match up your cost with your actual likely revenue generated. One version of the truth. This speaks to what we were saying earlier, which is if you have a services component or you're entirely services and services has provided you with estimates as part of your sales proposal, there's no longer a question of where it originated and what it becomes. As part of the OnePlan process, it will automatically become, if that makes sense, it will automatically become your actual project delivery schedule. We've talked a lot about OnePlan scheduling. It's important for us to emphasize that while OnePlan provides a robust scheduling mechanism, in fact, we integrate with Project for the Web, Planner, Smartsheet, Project Professional. Anything that you are currently using is available. Well, I shouldn't say anything, but likely anything you're currently using is available as a source for scheduling in OnePlan and is integrated out of the box. Delivery using a hybrid model. We are seeing this more and more in many organizations. It tends to typify organizations that are delivering internally rather than externally, but it doesn't make a difference in the end. What we see are a waterfall and agile approach combined. That is, within each stage of a waterfall schedule, you will have an iteration cycle. OnePlan supports this method as well. Should be no surprise at this point. And in the end, what you get in many ways are the benefits of both. You have an agile environment that can be run by the Scrum teams, and you have a waterfall plan that you can report to your senior executives saying, yes, this project will be done by this time. And again, in a services organization that sells a deliverable, that again, basic example is a bridge, there is a huge pool of stakeholders that expect this deliverable, the bridge, to be done at a certain time according to certain milestones. That doesn't mean that each individual team that is billing on a time and materials basis has to use a waterfall schedule in order to get this done. We will demonstrate this inside the tool itself. And, you know, this of course can get complex, but this shows what this could look like with your sprints running alongside your actual project plan. Each organization is going to be different and unique in this, and OnePlan supports that configurability. The key, of course, again, being that anywhere you need to apply Agile sensibly, you are able to do so, and you are able to combine it with the other three or the other planning mechanisms: resource capacity planning and financial planning. And again, in terms of Agile, just like with project scheduling, you are able to leverage Azure DevOps and Jira if you already have those in place. Surfacing information, key information to the team. We're going to demonstrate this at length, but you can get anything out of OnePlan that you put in, plus more. This being the year 2024, of course, OnePlan has an integration with ChatGPT called Sophia. We are able to do the things that you would expect to do in terms of having a chatbot on the page. We ask it questions. Sophia will answer based on our own internal documents as well as the interweb. This can be configured to honor whatever privacy restrictions you have. but it works just as miraculously as ChatGPT does. OnePlan integrations out of the box. Should be no surprise. Out of the box, we integrate with a ton of the products you might have. If we're not going to really talk much about how the integration works, but it is completely user configurable, including data field mapping, business rules, workflow scheduling, logging, and extensible and flexible. The key here being that your IT department isn't going to have to do it itself. You will be able to configure this. You will be able to maintain it yourself if that's what you choose, and move on from there. Fused UI is one of the key strengths of OnePlan. You can expect to see OnePlan not only standalone, but inside the environment that people are working in. This, again, I want to emphasize this. You have a sales team that is working in Dynamics or Power Apps. They will be able to work with OnePlan inside that, including automation. Same thing goes for Teams. Same thing goes for Azure DevOps. Same thing goes for Salesforce. So in any case, you should be thinking in terms of a fused AI approach, if that makes sense to you, that will then enable your users to lower their adoption risk and instead stay where they are, but get the information that they need. So no real surprise in terms of Salesforce. Create opportunities, sales and tracking, quotes and timelines, down to resource capacity and scenario modeling, then over to the active engagement and back up into Salesforce. Again, I use Salesforce as an example. The same thing can work similarly with Dynamics CRM or any other particular sales tool that you have. These are just examples of how this could work. And I hope that the takeaway from this is the notion that, again, this is a fused experience, and OnePlan sits in a spot where you can focus on what you need to with it and otherwise not have to make significant changes.